folks, I'm Matt, and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. The topic of UAPs, otherwise known as UFOs, continues to be a significant focus, with a flood of recent news and developments. Lou Elizondo's new book, Imminent, has become a New York Times #1 bestseller. Additionally, it has been announced that Nancy Mace will lead new UAP hearings in Congress. However, the most critical development at the present moment is that the U.S. Senate has returned from recess and is set to vote on the Unidentified Anomalous Disclosure Act of 2024, which is proposed as an amendment to the Senate's version of the National Defense Authorization Act. Here to discuss the importance of the UAP Disclosure Act is our guest today, Dr. Garry Nolan. But first, please hit the subscribe and thumbs up buttons on YouTube. Leave a comment and let us know what you think about this episode. You can also find us on X at Good Trouble Show and everywhere else at The Good Trouble Show. You can also find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Search for The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. And if you would like to keep the lights on, help us keep the lights on, you can chip in by becoming a Patreon member. Just go to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show, and you can support our work. So today's guest is an American immunologist. I have a hard time saying that. Immunologist, business executive, academic, and inventor. He holds the Ratchford and Carlotta A. Harris Professor Endowed Chair in the Department of Pathology at Stanford University School of Medicine. And if that's not enough, is one of the world's leading advocates for UAP transparency. He is the executive director of the Soul Foundation and is on the board of directors for Americans for Safe Aerospace and the UAP Disclosure Fund. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Garry Nolan. Dr. Nolan, how are you, sir?
Great, thank you. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well. I have to tell you, it is hot as heck down in Los Angeles. Yesterday it was up to 117 where I'm at. How about you? Are you burning up as well in Northern California?
No, it's really only in the 70s right now. Although a couple of weeks ago I was in Mykonos, Greece, where it actually got pretty hot. I was running around in the sun with an umbrella because of my fair skin.
And I hope you had a frosty beverage with you as you were running around in the heat. Yeah, it's been pretty crazy here. Anyway, glad to have you back, a friend of the show's. And the main reason that we have you on today is to talk about this very important piece of legislation that will be voted on by the Senate next week for inclusion in the National Defense Authorization Act, and that is the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024. For the viewers at home that are not familiar with this legislation, what is it? Why is it important to the American voter?
So it's important to the American voter in the most general sense because of the issue of transparency and governmental oversight of the Department of Defense and how it is that your taxpayer dollars are being spent. Now, we understand that the public doesn't need to know everything that the Defense Department is doing to protect us. But when it comes to something which is as interesting and openly valuable as knowing whether or not we're the only intelligence in either the solar system or even on this planet, it seems to me that hiding information for the last 80 years is not doing anybody any favors. So the act itself is 60 pages. It's version 2 of a very similar act that was put forward last year, and that was basically smothered in its bed by a couple of Republican Congress people, one of whom from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, for I think no good reason. I think try again. We're coming back at it with almost the exact same act, which covers some really interesting things. The first part about it is, first, we're going to go back 80 years and provide as much as is reasonably possible through a filter, all of the information regarding, or collect all of the information regarding UAP that the government thinks that it might have into one consolidated place. Then vet that information and determine which of it should be made public through the National Library for open use by the public at large, decide which of that information should stay secret for good reason, national security or otherwise. And actually a third version that I was involved in putting forward, at least an alternative way to use the information, is to set up public-private sponsorship of an investment in potential technologies that this might represent. To start to get some of that information out, bring on scientists from the outside who might know a little bit about how to analyze the data properly. But more so, and I think the most important part about it is, for the first time ever, putting out standards of what it is that we're talking about. What is a non-human intelligence? Let's forget this whole notion of using the term aliens or space aliens and all that ridiculousness, because of the number of ways that we know that that terminology is being abused and used purposefully.
Absolutely.
Open up the notion as it is put in the Act for non-human intelligence. That's what a scientist would do, right? Is they will not predefine what the objective of the measurement is by giving it a terminology that limits the questions that you could ask about it. Because of course, if you say alien, you're talking about, usually the implication is something extraterrestrial, whereas there's a whole range of other possibilities, things that might have been here a long time, that might have once been alien, but they've been here long enough that you could say, well, they perhaps have a better claim to the planet than we do. So, let's be more scientific about it, but moreover, stop coming to conclusions. Open up the data as it stands and say, okay, well, if this is the data, can we agree that the data is real? And then, in a purely scientific way, talk about what it is that that data implies. And so that is so beautifully written into the Act itself that it looks like it was constructed by a scientist. And that's what I like so much about the UAP amendment this time around, because it's saying we don't have the data, we don't have the analytic procedures that have been put forward as to how people are coming to conclusions. Let's get all of that out so that if the Department of Defense wants to say that there's nothing there, then we can have an open discussion as to whether the means of analytics that they applied to the data can be safely agreed upon as being correct or not. Now, what's interesting about it is that despite the fact that AARO and Sean Kirkpatrick and others have many times come out and said, oh, there's nothing there, right, where we don't have any evidence that it's alien. Well, okay, you also don't have evidence that it's the Muppets from Sesame Street.
True.
So let's just start defining what the terms are, Sean, so that you stop looking like an amateur. Because either people are saying this because they're being told to say it, and they have some sort of get out of jail free card, which I think Sean has.
That's my guess.
He has some sort of get out of jail free card, but why would you ruin your integrity and your reputation in the long term for such a short-term gain? Because the long-term gain, which is what the Act hopes to overcome, is instructing first the United States about the possibility that there's something here, but then further saying, well, here are the opportunities that can be realized from understanding what this might mean. I mean, the most obvious of them is we're not alone. Wouldn't that be great to know that?
And there's no doubt in your mind.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind at this point. I mean, scientifically, now let me just separate it. Scientifically, at this point, there's nothing more than Bayesian inference that allows me to say that there's 95% plus probability that there's something here. All the information that we have from all of the decades, it can't all be wrong. So there's something there. Scientifically, I can't come to the conclusion because I can't hand that information to another scientist and say that, yes, there's something here. But from what I've seen, from what I know, and from the people I've spoken to, and the things that I'm aware of, there's no doubt. I mean, I wouldn't be involved with this. I wouldn't put at risk my scientific reputation and the prizes that I get put up for to risk all of that if I didn't think that the value of that outcome was worth more than any of the prizes that people have said that I get put up for.
Now, earlier in the program, I played the clip of whistleblower David Grush at the congressional hearing back in 2023. And under oath, under the penalty of perjury, of course, he stated unequivocally that the United States government has been operating decades-long, highly classified special access programs to recover and reverse engineer crashed UAPs, otherwise known as UFOs. Do you believe this is true? And have sources other than David Grush indicated that the United States government, in particular the Pentagon and the intelligence community, have been operating a reverse engineering, crash recovery, and reverse engineering program of non-human craft?
I have spoken to enough people now where it's really not a matter of belief in whether or not it's true. It's whether or not I believe the individuals who are telling me the things that they're telling me. And so there's what I call a chain of custody of trust that a scientist uses when they listen to what another scientist says. I don't need to go into their laboratory and stand over the shoulder of the individual telling me who did the experiment to see whether or not they did the experiment right. Similarly, with the people that I've spoken to and the kinds of positions that they've held or currently hold today, I have every reason to listen to what they have to say and to, accord it very high probability. I mean, I hate to use the term belief, because belief is so easily translated by those who want to stigmatize the subject, to call it a religion or a cult. And so I don't believe anything. I just assign probabilities of likelihood and whether or not it's something that I should continue to investigate. And, I think what people in the government need to worry about is not whether or not people like me believe it. It's whether people like me will start to take things and matters into their own hands, right? And whether others will take matters into their own hands. I mean, do they really want the term has been used, catastrophic disclosure. I think it's an interesting term, but do they really want people to not trust the government so that if they do ever come in, possession of materials like this, to take it into their own hands, into their own garage, and start using it in ways, or start investigating it or studying it in ways, and then putting it out into the public in a way that makes the whole government look foolish? I don't think that they want something like that. Do they want the Chinese or the Russians to come out and make the U.S. government look like a bunch of liars again?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something I've been saying on this program time and time again. This is going to come out. There is zero doubt this will come out. The question is the United States government, and particularly the Pentagon and the intelligence community, the CIA, are they going to do the right thing and handle this in a responsible way, rather than doing it in a way where they just throw caution to the wind and whatever happens. I mean, that in and of itself, I think, puts the security of the United States in jeopardy. Now, do you think that the Pentagon knows where these things are from?
No, I do not. I think they know that they are not from here, or that they know that they're not human. That's for sure. However you want to define human. I define human as the current civilization that we read about in Twitter and in the newspapers every day. You can broaden the definition of what is human all the way out to future humans, et cetera. So if you want to cover your ass and say, well, it's future humans, and so therefore if I say that it's not alien, then, and I really know that it's some sort of alternate civilization that is human based, that gets me out of telling a lie in front of Congress. I think we all know what we're talking about here. And I mean, moreover, it's really about, for me at least, it's not just the existential question of, is it human or non-human? It's, what does the technology represent that we don't understand and we don't know? And what is the opportunity for what that technology might give us, right? I mean, so to me, it's about, if if things are moving in ways we don't understand and a kind of physics that we don't understand, that as a scientist excites me. So why can't we just know that that's the truth, that it does that? Because are they afraid that we'll discover some way to travel that they can't tax? Is that
Right.
is that the
Yeah.
idea? Or that there's a form of energy that they can no longer tax? Does that change the power structure in some way? Yes, it does. But why not do it in a manner that they can continue to control rather than some kind of uncontrolled release of information that ends up disrupting the economies of the planet in ways that we have no way to predict the outcome?
Well,
I mean, that to me is the existential danger.
absolutely. Do you think that the Pentagon considers this, or the United States government writ large considers this a national security threat? Because they sure don't seem to be acting that way, at least publicly.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure. Yes, they do. I mean, given the threats that I know people have received and that I personally have received, I know that they consider it an existential threat.
You have received personal threats.
Oh, yeah. I've talked about it previously. Yeah.
That just.
And
go ahead.
Literally given to me by someone on behalf of people in the executive branch saying, shut up.
And that absolutely makes my blood boil. We know we've heard this certainly with Lou Elizondo, David Grush. Back in November, myself, Josh Boswell, and Christopher Sharp, we wrote an article for the Daily Mail detailing how the CIA Office of Global Access, under the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology, have been running this reverse engineering crash recovery program for quite a long time. One of the things that we discovered in our research for this story is that these crash recovery missions run by the Office of Global Access, which is a very secretive, highly secretive organization within the CIA, that half of the recovery operations were tasked to JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, so Tier 1 operators such as Navy SEALs and whatnot, to pick up these craft and take them back to wherever for reverse engineering. But what we also found out is about half of the recovery operations are sent directly to private defense contractors, and we weren't able to find out exactly how that decision was made. And the reason I bring this up, part of this legislation in the UAP Disclosure Act contains an eminent domain clause. Explain to us why that eminent domain clause is there, how it relates to these private aerospace contractors, and why it is important to have that in this legislation.
Well, the eminent domain clause is really there as a stick. It's been used by both people within the government or within the defense agencies as a reason why the act should not be passed. And it's been used even by some of our friends and colleagues to say that it shouldn't be passed because it gives then the government the right to come in and gather something that they might have collected by themselves, which again, that kind of reverts back to what I was saying before, is you're giving people a reason to go out and get the stuff themselves. And the eminent domain is meant to basically say that the government has the right to come in and take it because for whatever reason, the US government considers it to be owned. I don't worry as much as some of our colleagues do about whether eminent domain would ever be applied, because I think the first moment that anybody would come after something like that, you'd file a lawsuit. And just because somebody says that I have something doesn't mean that I'm going to tell anybody where it is that I've got it hidden, for instance. But let's unpack this notion. Let's unpack this notion of crash retrieval. Okay, the first question that often gets asked by the public is, if these things are so advanced, how do they crash? Or why would they crash? Well, I mean, I think that tells you something about if it's true that there are crash retrievals, it tells you something about the technology that is operable behind the scenes. it means that it's probably not as stable as you think it is. It's sort of like they're running running across a high wire. It's a high wire act, if you will. And it doesn't take much to bring one of them down. Everything from an electromagnetic pulse or a lightning storm or a nuclear bomb or something going on nearby, it would be enough to bring these things down. But what happens if the actuality is that somehow these things are being there are ways to make them show up, and when you make them show up, you find a way to bring them down. Not that I know that this is the case, but you have to imagine that might be what's going on. So if that's in fact what's going on, then that means that if it's ever discovered how that is operational, then anybody could possibly do it, right? And so that means then that if there are teams that are doing this, what happens if any members of those teams were at one point or another to decide to go public?
Yeah.
And what does that do to the operation? And what does that mean for how other governments might take advantage of this? And I mean, if the U.S. government is doing it, and it's one of the things in science that I know is that once I know something can be done, then I start thinking very hard about how else I might accomplish the same goal. So if it's now basically an open secret that these kinds of reverse engineering programs and crash retrievals are being done, you know that no matter how broad the net that the Department of Defense might cast across the planet to be able to go after any of these things that comes down, there's going to be a few that slip through the cracks. And when they do, and you better hope that there aren't some darn good scientists on the other side of that curtain, and they get that information out, it's a Pandora's box of problems, in my opinion.
One of the issues, it seems, is that this has clearly been hidden from Congress. We understand that all of this is classified under the 1954 Atomic Energy Act, and it actually sits within the Department of Energy under their classification system. It's classified, I believe it's under a foreign nuclear material or something of that sort. I'd have to look at my notes. But it's classified at the same level as things that are under presidential emergency action directives, such as continuity of government operations, such as the nuclear war plan. That is where it sits. A good example that would illustrate why Congress has not had access to this. And we know prior to 9/11, I believe it was the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee asked the White House and the Department of Energy to show this chair the U.S. nuclear war plan, because that is classified under presidential emergency action directive. The White House and the Department of Energy said, no way, you're not allowed to look at it, despite the fact this guy was the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee. So the fact that this is classified at the same level, if not in excess of our state nuclear secrets, Congress has no access to this, which to me seems to fly in the face of constitutionally mandated congressional oversight of the executive branch. My question to you is, should Congress be read into this? Should they have oversight of this issue? Because they certainly do not at the present moment.
Well, I mean, you know what my answer is? My answer is yes, because they should have oversight. And at the very least, they should be bringing in members of the public to help adjudicate for them what information should or should not be involved. I mean, look, the Congress is busy running the country, supposedly, right? Let's assume the best.
Supposedly.
and that their goal to be there is to bring in and as advisors the necessary individuals or teams to help them make decisions. I mean, politically, they have many things to have to manage, but that's really what the UAP amendment, as written by Rounds and Schumer, provides for. It provides a panel, an oversight panel, for individuals, scientists, historians, ethicists, religious individuals, et cetera, who would go over the raw data and decide really what appears to be proof or evidence of something, provide that back up in terms of summaries, and to say this is what might or might not be done about it, and here are the implications of this knowledge being made public. And if it is made public, here's how we, let's say, dumb it down or frame it. And then here's how it is then that some of this needs to stay secret, or here are the kinds of programs that we need to run to understand what the technology is. And again, I have been advocating for public-private investment approaches where somebody could come in and basically put down money to say, hey, if you understand this, I'll give some money, pay for scientists. The information gets out, intellectual property gets assigned to the people who provided some of the money, and we move forward in the best possible way that capitalist incentives might drive it. So that, I think, is really what the Act very beautifully covers. It basically says, what is it that's known? Let's put it back under its rightful control of government, not some unelected. I hate that term usually because it's usually used in the most negative sense, but here it really does apply. There seems to be an unelected government behind the scenes that's deciding what it is, like mommy and daddy, that the children should or shouldn't know. I'm not a child. Neither is the U.S. populace. So let's let and bring in the kinds of experts that would allow for us to understand this in a better way, and put the matter to rest. If there's nothing there,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's $20 million is all that they're basically
nothing.
setting aside over 10 years. If there's nothing there and you think I'm wasting my time and you think that I'm foolish for wasting my time and you'd like to see me waste more time, then just give me the money and let me work with other people to figure it out. And then at the end of the day, I'll tell you, yes, it's done. I mean, look, I went out there and I proved that little Atacama mummy, despite what everybody wanted it to be, was human. It made a lot of people unhappy, but that's what science is. So let's bring science to bear. Let's stop laughing at the question itself, and let's just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to this UAP advisory board within the White House, if called to serve, would you serve on that panel?
Absolutely, I would do so. For the last one, I also nominated a couple of Nobel Prize winners. I mean, I was nominated to be on the committee should it be constituted, but I also nominated scientists who I know who would be able to look at it in a completely objective manner. They don't even know that I nominated them, but I know that they are the kinds of scientists that if, frankly, they were given the opportunity, they would probably jump at it, but they would also adjudicate the information and the decision in the kind of way that I would respect.
Well, I tell you what, I think they've got an economist, theologian, scientist. If they decide to add a talk show host to the White House UAP panel, Garry, I'll slip you a 20 if you throw my name in the hat.
Okay, we'll do it. All right.
Okay, so back to this, and of course I'm joking. This is a very serious matter. Back to this panel. Let's say we know now that we have a new director of AARO, Sean Kirkpatrick, who I think was nothing short of abject disaster as a scientist on AARO, had Tim Phillips take his place after he left, and we now have a new director of AARO. Let's say that this legislation does indeed pass the Senate. It goes into the manager's package for the Senate version of the NDAA, and it goes into reconciliation at the end of the year. And the House side says, you know what, we'll do this panel. We'll have this White House advisory panel, but we're going to let AARO staff it.
I think that AARO has such a baked-in problem in terms of the perception. It's like putting the wolf in charge of the chicken coop. Or the fox. I just don't think it's the right thing. I think AARO should be there simply to help us collect the data. They should be in absolutely no decision-making position. They are part of the DoD, and as far as I'm concerned, to a large extent, they're part of the problem. Now, I'm sorry if that upsets some people in AARO, but until this point, you have proven me nothing but right. Now, if the Oversight Committee is given oversight over AARO in some manner, then I would say, okay, but I don't think they should be staffing it. To the extent that they staff it, they should be our secretaries. Sorry. That's what they should do. They should be there to gather stuff for us, not to decide what it is that we should or shouldn't do. I'm sorry, that's just not how it should be done. We have to sweep the place clean. Frankly, and I'm sorry again if this upsets somebody, I think AARO should be disbanded because they've done it all wrong. Take all the information that they've collected and we'll reconstitute it in some other manner. I sort of feel like you have to make some really bold and strong statements here, because if you don't, the creeping assumption is that AARO should somehow be in control. No, wrong. The DoD should not be in control of this, in my opinion. They should advise the advisory group, and then the national security state should say, okay, well, here's a reason why that information should or should not be released. But, and I'm not saying that the panel in and of itself should be making all of the decisions, but the panel should have access to all of it so that they can tell Congress and or the executive what it is that is there for whether or not it should stay public or should stay private, secret, or should go public. They need an advisory group. Now, right now, there are groups like In-Q-Tel, and people at In-Q-Tel, I think there's some guy, well, I shouldn't mention his name, who is supposedly in charge of part of this. I'd be more than willing to listen to In-Q-Tel's advice on these things, because I actually do believe that they have a forward-facing commercial reason for getting technology out in a manner that serves the public and the United States benefit. So I would like to hear from those kinds of groups, not a place like AARO, which frankly has demonstrated its complete inability to even write a report that I wouldn't have given an F to an 8th grader on, as many individuals have, Chris Mellon amongst them, have gone over and shown the complete lack of professionalism that the last report put out. I mean, it was
embarrassing,
unfortunately pathetic.
Yeah, and it makes my blood boil to think the amount of taxpayer money that was spent on this report that was, full of grammatical errors, spelling errors. I mean, it was truly amateur hour. I don't have kids, but if I had an 8th grader, I know they could have put out a better report than AARO and Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. That's for sure.
I mean, how much money did they spend just pulling in their pet reporters from the New York Times and the Washington Post and other places to give them a preview of the report? And these reporters, Julian Barnes amongst them, I'm sorry, Julian, you swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. And I know you did it just so you could get more, national intelligence
access
or DOD access. But where's your integrity?
Yeah, it's exactly.
Sorry for being so,
well, that's true. It's
pointed about it, but you have to be. I mean, we can't tiptoe around this. I don't have time to tiptoe around it. I'm 63 years old.
well, and the thing is there comes a point where you have to put country before your own self-interest. So when I see these journalists such as Julian Barnes and others that are clearly parroting the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, because they know that they need to do that to maintain access to people within the government, it's really it's sad on both sides. It's sad that the Pentagon uses this as a weapon and as a way to control the public discourse and information. And it's also sad on the journalists' part that they stoop to that level and put their own self-interest above what clearly is a significant national security issue that absolutely must be addressed. And going back to national security, you'll hear people say, well, these are a threat. These are not a threat. There's a lot of debate around that. But one area of particular interest, and which to me really emphasizes that this is a significant national security concern, is the long history of UAP tampering with our strategic land-based nuclear deterrent. And we know that's happened here. We know that has happened in Russia. I would imagine it has happened in other countries. Do you think just on that one topic alone, and it's documented in FOIA cases and whatnot, that Congress should go to the Pentagon and say, hey, look, if this is happening, what are we doing about this? Is this not just a clear and present danger to the national security of the United States?
Again, the answer is yes. We all should be concerned. If anything is flying around our aircraft carriers or our nuclear power generation sites. I mean, we've seen what's been happening, for instance, in the Ukraine, where a drone with just a small bomb pack is, correctly aimed, can blow up a high-end, super well-armored Russian tank. That's all that's needed to basically cause havoc. It doesn't take much. So how much havoc are you going to allow around one of our nuclear power stations, right? What could happen if the wrong thing were to be allowed to happen at one of these sites? So that we do not have control over our airspace in some of these extremely sensitive places scares me. I mean, I don't know how many nuclear power stations California still has, or the United States still has, but who wants another 3 Mile Island? Who wants another meltdown like happened in Ukraine 20, 30 years ago? I don't think anybody. So I think we really want to make sure that we have control over our airspace, and that you want the government to admit when we don't and not hide it, because maybe, again, the public might have an answer to help solve the issue.
Why do you think the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, the intelligence community has gone to such great lengths to hide this from Congress and the American people?
Let's pull the thread a little bit and ask the question, what might have been done in the past to keep the secret safe, right? What kinds of laws might have been broken, first of all, to collect some of these, let's say, reverse engineered craft? Who might have been hurt in the process of doing it and collecting it? And what, therefore, liabilities does the U.S. government open itself to for admitting that they might have programs that go after these materials in ways that would stun the public, that would cause the public to say, that's how you're doing this. This is the people that you're putting at risk to accomplish this. And then that you're telling them that what they've been told to collect is not what they actually collected, and they've been hurt in the process of that. That to me is really the danger, is that once, I think this is really what's going on, to be honest, is that once you open that Pandora's box and you start pulling the threads of what's behind going on, all of this, that you open the government and many individuals to kinds of liability that I think would shock the public at large. And that's really what bothers me, is some of the things that I hear about what has been done to get us to the point where we're at, makes it is a scandal beyond scandals: medical scandals, medical ethical scandals, psychosocial scandals, monetary scandals. All of these things are the reasons why people get threatened.
Can you provide an example of one of those things that would fall under that umbrella?
Well, let's say, for instance, that you, as a crash retrieval team, you were sent out to pick up something that was dangerous. And what happens if you got sick because of it, right? I mean, some of the original medical cases that I was involved with, that most of which ended up being Havana syndrome, which we now know to be real, despite what the CIA came out and said. There actually was the National Institutes of Health pulled the program that they were doing that was studying it, because they found that the Department of Defense was stuffing the medical cohort with phonies, basically, to dilute the signal. And just like 2 weeks ago, they pulled it. So, there's the harm that is potentially being caused. But of the 100 or so individuals that I didn't oversee all of them, I didn't see all of them. But when we took out the Havana syndrome individuals, we had a subset of individuals, some of whom had gotten close to craft, they claimed, and they'd gotten hurt because of it. Now, I don't know that they were sent to these, to be involved with whatever these objects were that they claimed they interacted with. But you could pretty reasonably assume that because they were military, that they were essentially being put in harm's way at some level. And yeah, that's what they sign up for, I guess. But what they don't sign up for is to be denied care post the anomalous health incident that they get. Literally, the government has now put out a report on anomalous health incidents and has now provided a pathway for people who have all kinds of anomalous health incidents, some of which probably are UAP associated. They provide an absolute path about how you can use the Veterans Administration to help take care of yourself because of it. So it's funny, the government seems to be schizoid about it, that there are individuals who are doing everything they can to put together mechanisms to help individuals and to get the information out. And then there's another part of the government that's doing everything it can to stop any information and any help from occurring. And it's kind of like the stock market. Things go up and down, but if you keep investing over the long term, you'll get a return. And I think the long-term return is that we're going to move forward. And as you said, it's inevitable that this information is going to get out.
Yeah, I can tell. I had a discussion with a former high-ranking national security official that said Havana is classified in the same bucket as UAP. It's actually under under the Department of Energy, Atomic Energy Act, under the classification of special nuclear material in what is called transclassified nuclear information. That is in a further bucket called restricted data and formally restricted data, but all of this sits under the Department of Energy, which, again, members of Congress, they do not have access to that. It doesn't matter if you're a committee chair or whatnot, you do not have access to those particular things that are classified within the Department of Energy. So that completely makes sense. Now, you are, just kind of taking a little a step back here before I want to dig into a final couple of questions about the legislation. So you are you're on the board of directors for the Soul Foundation, Americans for Safe Aerospace, and the UAP Disclosure Fund. I would love for you to talk a little bit about the organizations that you are part of and how these organizations are helping with disclosure.
So the Soul Foundation, at least one of its goals, are to provide a perimeter within which academics or interested individuals can come and talk about the matter in a purely scientific manner. No conclusions, just the data. Let's war game out the ideas and what it means, and provide scenarios of let's make the assumption that something is real. If something is real and something might happen, what might be the consequences, and how would or should society react to it? How should scientists approach it? How might you invest in areas? It's not making the assumption that any of it truly is real. It's just saying, let's be prepared, right? And that's what you would want from academics, to hypothesize and then come up with answers for things. So that's largely the role of the one of the roles of the Soul Foundation. We're not an advocacy group, except to scientists to say, hey, come on in, the water's warm. It's okay to talk about this. You won't get laughed out of the room. ASA, and that's the Americans for Safe Aerospace, and that's really talking about the commercial and military flights, and the whether or not ignoring the possibility of UAP puts either the general populace or military pilots at risk. Now, we've already seen how that organization by itself has opened up both the FAA as well as the military to say, look, it's okay now to report these things. You don't have to ignore it anymore. And that's helped. That's been a great thing, because now pilots, even, one of my former roommates from college was a military pilot, with the Navy. He now flies commercial. Even he now feels it's okay to talk about the matter, and he talks with some of his fellow pilots. He's not seen anything personally, but he knows some of his colleagues have. So it's opened up that discussion. And the UAP Disclosure Fund is another step altogether, and the objective there is to actually be government policy advocates, to put forward potential laws, to talk to the representatives and senators behind the scenes and provide them information, help them write legislation. But moreover, and I think this is one of the most important parts of it, is to provide a path for whistleblowers and to write laws around protecting whistleblowers, so that when they do come forward with information, that they're not attacked on the basis of some basically made up rules, or they're not retributed against, as was, say, Dave Rush, and that they're protected from retribution, so that when they do come forward with information of illegalities, that they're allowed to do so in a manner that is fully in accordance with federal law and expectations of reporting wrongdoing. I mean, just because there's a whistleblower law doesn't give somebody the right to come forward with any information. It has to be associated with something which is clearly illegal, like misappropriation of funds, medical harm of individuals, or inappropriate or unethical ways of using commercial rights, such as, for instance, you're given an object, let's say that, one of these craft is brought down. Well, who gets the intellectual property associated with it for discovery? And if you give it to defense contractor A and not defense contractor B, and defense contractor A ends up developing something that puts out of business one of the other defense contractors, who, is that right?
Exactly.
And if it happens, who gets to sue whom?
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the other thing I wonder too, we had David Dorr, a financial this guy. He's I think second in command at Pacific Gas and Electric, in charge of their retirement funds. And what we discussed is these aerospace corporations that we know are in possession of craft of non-human origin, let's say Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman. If they are misrepresenting the valuation of their companies to the Security Exchange Commission and their shareholders, that is a criminal liability of the nth degree, because that C-suite, the CFO, the CEO, they sign off on those financials. So if you're Lockheed Martin and you're not valuating your company accurately, as a matter of fact, you're hiding the true value of your company, the legal ramifications, the criminal ramifications, not only for the company, but for the C-suite, are profound.
I mean, if you're using, let's say, proprietary information to sell or not sell stock on the basis of knowledge you have that should be made available to others, there's a line of lawyers waiting to sue you. So, obviously they have to be careful about that. But I think this really, rather than talk about the threats and, giving people more reasons to keep it secret, I think another form of, let's say, whistleblower protection that needs to be done, it's not the whistleblowers per se, but in parallel, we really do need to start talking seriously about some kind of immunity for people, or for corporations, or for individuals who've done these things. I mean, we could spend the next 100 years in lawsuits if any of this is true. And just in retribution and anger and pounding everybody and chasing down every possible liability path. Rather, I would like to say, absent, outright murder or outright harm to and trauma to individuals, how is it that we protect these corporations in a way that makes it an incentive for them to come forward, or at least not to fight it any longer, right? How do we protect the country against a spin cycle of self-accusation and to incentivize these companies to come forward? Now, there's a rumor, for instance, that because of the heat brought forward because of AARO or congressional acts, that Lockheed was looking to offload some materials to other companies. They were like, okay, this is getting too hot. We don't want to deal with this anymore. I see that as a good thing. But I think what would stimulate that even more would be to say, come clean, you get immunity, you still get to keep the intellectual property that you've generated, but you do have to share the underlying technology with others so that, you might have missed something, and maybe there's other things that could be exploited out of it. So I think there's an equal discussion for, let's say, the UAP Disclosure Fund that I'm involved with, would be to start to talk about, well, what does immunity look like for these groups, right? What does immunity look like for Sean Kirkpatrick for the lying that he's done, that I think he's done? My opinion only.
My opinion as well. Yeah, no, I hear you. And I do agree. This needs to be brought out of the shadows. People make mistakes. Countries make mistakes. as my mom always told me, it's often not the original sin, it's the subsequent lies of trying to cover up the original sin that are actually so bad. And I personally think that is probably in many ways where the federal government finds themselves. So if we know that members of Congress and their staffers watch this show, what would you say to those staffers or those members of Congress right now who are watching this, wondering whether they should support the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024?
Well, first of all, thank you to all of the staffers and members who have taken the steps that they have. What an extraordinary act of bravery. It isn't exactly, politicians aren't exactly known for bravery, but the ones who've done this so far are truly heroes. I mean, more
Absolutely.
so than those of us out there like me blabbing our mouths off because there's no consequences really to me and the things that I say. These are people who have truly taken to heart the best interests of the country. And they are doing what they think is best because they can see the value of it. So first thing I would say, thank you to those who have done that. And then I would say to those who are looking at this and considering doing more, speak to the members who actually are doing it and ask them the question, why are you doing this? I mean, I get asked by other scientists, why are you doing this, Garry? Why are you risking your reputation? Because I see the value of what it means. Because I also think, like Avi Loeb does, that the question in and of itself is not off the table and is a valuable one to be allowed to be asked. But I think the members of Congress who do have the ability to raise or look behind the curtain a little more, and those who have already seen that they think that there's something valuable here or something that needs to be looked at further. So I would say to those who are still sitting on the fence, staffers, representatives, or senators, look to the individuals like Schumer and Rounds and Rubio and several others. I can't remember all of their names.
Gillibrand and
who they've come forward and done so for good reason. Not because there's a bunch of people like me out there screeching about that there should be something looked at, because they actually have seen some of the raw data. They've been in the SCIFs. They've been privy to the kinds of briefings that convince them that there's something here. So don't laugh it off. Stop with terminology that further stigmatizes. Act like a scientist. Act like a responsible representative of the people and do what's right. Vote for the act. Don't kill it in committee the day before it has to be voted on. Don't drown it in the dead of night, mixing metaphors. Right? Let's just get it done. If you're afraid of it, then okay, keep pushing against it. But if you're not afraid and you don't think that there's anything there, it's not going to hurt anybody to let us investigate it in a much more scientific and credible manner.
Well said. I couldn't agree more. What would you say to the American voter as to why this matters and what they should do about this?
It matters, first of all, because it is about government transparency. If they can misrepresent at this level about something which is so important, imagine how easy it is for them to misrepresent how they're spending your other tax dollars. Right? I mean, if we don't get a handle on this now, you're never going to see true representative government. I mean, this is really all about representative government and whether or not you believe that you have a say in what your government is doing. And so I would say vote, ask your representative if you're in a town hall what they think they should be doing about it, and say up front to them, don't give me space alien as an answer. I want to hear what you really think about this and whether you think that science and or the government should be involved. And do you believe your military personnel? And do you believe, mean, how many different, I made a list. How many different former directors of national intelligence or the CIA? John Ratcliffe, James Woolsey, John Brennan, McMaster just today, Chris Mellon, General Nathan Twining from years ago. All these individuals have said that there's something here. How many such individuals are there that have come forward at such a high level and said that there's something here worth studying, and that we're going to continue to ignore? And so it just bothers me to a very deep level that we're willing to ignore the people that we've put in charge of the safety of this country, who've come forward and said that there's something here worth studying, and we're not taking advantage of all that expertise and knowledge. So that's money in the bank already. So let's move forward and vote out the people who think that it's okay to hide this. That's
absolutely. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, Dr. Nolan, thank you so much for joining us. And we really appreciate your support and your hard work on this really very important topic to our national security. Thanks for coming, and looking forward to having you back, hopefully with good news that the UAP Disclosure Act has passed with flying colors.
Hopefully. Yes. Thank you very much.